LeBron or Kevin Love, whatever different examples. But point being that I thought you'd get the most out of a guy. I think what we talk about when people keep going, Alex Mack with his 52-79 snap. Well, where do you think he got that from? Because when he came in, and some people just liked it, you just went the opposite of some people. Some people just refuse to give Joe Thomas the credit that he deserves. And I believe on the field, he's as good as advertised and has been for quite some time. But off the field, I don't believe, and I could be wrong. I mean, I'm not saying Alex Mack doesn't bring a lunch pail either. But who's to say that he goes his first 5,300 consecutive plays without ever missing, and he's got that work ethic to get an appendicitis during a game and throw up on the sidelines and then play the game and have surgery and come back next week, all the things that he does. If he doesn't have an Iron Man example for his beginning of his career that shows him, and that's what Joe Thomas shows these offensive linemen for the Browns. Every day he shows up, he goes to work. It doesn't matter what's happening in his personal life. It doesn't matter if he's hurt. He just shows up and works every single day, no questions asked. I truly believe that we're not talking about Alex Mack having the same kind of a streak if he doesn't have Joe Thomas when he first gets drafted into the NFL.
I think, that's the one group in the NFL that's closer than any else, than any other group, and it's the offensive line for every team. If you go into any NFL locker room, those are the closest knit guys, and it's because you have to act as one to be successful, to act as a unit. And, anybody who's questioning what Joe Thomas has given the Cleveland Browns over the years is going down the wrong path, because he hasn't been the problem. But if you saw the game last night on national TV with the Eagles and Giants, and you saw how poorly the Giants' offensive line performed, similar situation, Detroit against Minnesota, the Vikings offense today. We always talk about quarterback, probably the most important position in sports. But if your offensive line is not performing, you don't have a chance offensively. So, a lot of people, and when you have good players, good offensive lines as a whole, and good players like Joe Thomas and Alex Mack have been specifically, you tend to not even notice them because it's like clockwork. And then all of a sudden, if you see Justin Pugh yesterday or Matt Khalil, who are just struggling so mightily, and struggling with their confidence, aren't able to do anything, and it affects the entire offense of their particular teams. So people kind of take those guys for granted, and with all that, is going to bring that up later with all the joy of the win and finally beating Ben Roethlisberger and kind of behind him. That was the one. But Alex Mack's likely gone for the season at least.
No, but I'll tell you what. We mentioned it earlier, and I was going to ask you your thoughts. John Greco. What was amazing is because I thought maybe Christian Yount, because he's a long snapper. I'm like, who are they going to replace? We were sitting there while they were carting off Alex Mack, and I'm like, okay, who are they going to replace Mack with? And then they slid Greco over from guard, and they put McQuiston. I loved him when they signed him, and this is why, because he's a good, I can fill in for anybody on your line. But Greco said after the game, not just not in the pros, in college, in high school. He's like, I've never snapped the ball before. I've never done this before. And he did a very good job. Now, I'm thinking if he was able to, on the fly, do a competent job like that, perhaps maybe you don't have to, because I was worried about the same thing. I go, that's typical Cleveland. You're on a roll. Just like last year, you're 3-2, but you had just lost your quarterback. This is a hole that could really cause your team a problem. But maybe they have a multifaceted couple of guys like Greco there that can slide over. And I'm thinking if he was able to hold up to it in the fire, then they should be able to coach him up, and maybe you're replacing Alex Mack either way. But I did think good job by the Browns of adapting, and kudos to Greco if he had truly never snapped before to come in and do it like that. Hey, that was not an easy thing for him to do, especially because I mentioned it right before you called. The very first play, if you go back and dial up the replay, the very first play, Dick LeBeau drew up a running 15-yard head start for the safety directly at the point of attack. He sent him right to the center, and he tried to blow up the center on the very first play, and Greco held his block on that thing. The Browns got the play off, and then it was smooth sailing from there. But Dick LeBeau, it just showed his smarts to me. He instantly attacked aggressively right at the weak point.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point because he's one of the few defensive coordinators that really will hit things on the fly, and so many guys are so structured and stick to their game plan and don't pay attention to situations like that. So even though it didn't work out, and you do give a lot of credit to a guy like John Greco and the fact that you signed Paul McQuiston, who's got some experience and versatility, and he can come in, but. That's the point. Alex Mack's for a reason.
Yep.
He got paid because he is who he is, and the one issue is you mentioned Dick LeBeau, being able to think on his feet where other defensive coordinators probably wouldn't, which I agree with. But now they know Alex Mack is gone, so everybody's going to game plan for that, and it is going to be far more difficult moving forward because people are going to understand that once, one of the biggest strengths on the Browns offense is no longer there. And again, you don't replace players like that. And, the Philadelphia Eagles here are going through the same thing with Jason Kelsey, who might be the best center in the NFC. He went down with a sports hernia. In David Molk, the backup, has, been okay at times, but it's not the same. And you're going to see a similar situation in Cleveland because you cannot replace players like that.
I agree. Next man up is a good phrase, and it does have to happen, but it's not necessarily your goal either. There's a reason guys are who they are, and there's a reason that Alex Mack got paid the way Alex Mack. That's not going to be like you brought up last week, and then now here this week. I mentioned earlier, you're a nationally syndicated writer. Your stuff's out there, and you see these other guys. You see the stories. It's been growing really since the season started, but especially as the Browns have begun to have some success and get their legs out from underneath them, and Brian Hoyer, the whole story. You've seen some of the national outlets take it and run with it. And yesterday's victory, the same. This morning, Dan Wismar, who's going to join us next, sends me the Bill Rhoden article from the New York Times, and they even did a piece on it today about how, the fans need to begin to learn to believe in this team because, things are different. But you're seeing that now, the story. It's become one of the top few feel-good stories, and the NFL could surely hide behind some of those with all the bad stuff at the start of the season, but this has become one of those, hey, look at one of the good stories in the NFL, and it's really catching fire around the national media.
Yeah, and rightfully so. At some point, you got to take a look at the guy, and we keep saying small sample size. Well, that small sample size keeps getting bigger, and right now it's 6-2 as the starter of the Cleveland Browns, and right now, there's no question he should be the starter. There's no more talk, at least there shouldn't be any talk about Johnny Manziel. And you date back to the preseason, we've talked about this. And for guys like Brian Hoyer, when they get an opportunity, they have to take advantage of it. And there's going to be a small margin of error. He's not going to have the long rope that a first-round pick has. That's just the nature of the beast, and he's taken advantage of it. And yesterday was just another example of it. Think about how many quarterbacks have played for the Cleveland Browns over that 18-1 stretch we talked about against Ben Roethlisberger. Who beats him? Brian Hoyer. And still people look at it and say it was the running game, and it was, as we said, they pounded the ball. And Hoyer only threw it, I think, 17 times. But that was the game plan, and he played to the game plan tremendously. And when he did get his chances off play action, he took advantage of them, and he completed some big throws down the field. And that's what you're looking for. And now you look at this stretch. We talked about that too. About the stretch of the net. You could make a strong argument, it doesn't get any better than this because over the next 3 weeks, the Cleveland Browns might be facing the 3 worst teams in football. So if everything goes to plan, you never want to look ahead, and that's one thing Mike Penton's going to be preaching. But the Cleveland Browns, we can talk about it because we're sports radio people.
Yep.
They should be 6-2 in 3 weeks. That's what their record should be in 3 weeks.
The way you said it is perfect because, and here, seriously, here, it's always, we have to, even when we say good things, you always have to qualify it with the, well, like you said, small sample size, or, well, there's still so many games left to play. You have to qualify it, but truly, the Browns, there's absolutely zero reason in the world why 3 weeks from now they should not be 6-2. That's not fantasy thinking. That's reality. They've shown that they can beat good teams and that they can beat bad teams. They should be 6-2 heading into the next portion of the schedule where things change. So, I mean, that's a different way of looking at things than the way it's been. But that's what happens when you put together a couple of weeks in a row the way that they did here. And as you said, whether it's with the quarterback, the defense too, they picked a week to show up, taking the offense out of the equation. That defense did a good job of shutting down what Pittsburgh was trying to do. Pittsburgh tried to go with a steady dose of the run. They tried to mix things up later, but by that point then, Cleveland got a big advantage, and you change your game plan. Unlike the Browns, and we saw an example. John, you and I have mentioned pounding that rock and how the Browns have been running, even when they're down big double-digit deficits, they keep running, and that's kind of throwing defenses off because they're used to offensive coordinators saying, well, we throw on every play now. And Pittsburgh kind of lost their running game in the second half, and you saw that one-dimensional. It makes it easier to attack. But Antonio Brown, he didn't really get off anywhere against Joe Hayden. Had a couple of catches, but nothing serious. And, they got a few pass interference calls on the Browns that got them some big chunks. But other than that, the Browns defensively played very well. Le'Veon Bell did not go crazy like some people thought he would either.
Yeah, and, they picked, you're right, they picked a good week to have their best game as a unit, I think. And, it's interesting because we always talk about Hoyer and Manziel. I think Buster Screen might be the Brian Hoyer of the defense because, Justin Gilbert's there. He's the top 10 pick and but he can't outplay the other guy, and that's what's going on defense. And it's about production at this level. It's not about pedigree. And yesterday, I think, the best player on their defense was probably Carlos Dansby. But besides him, I would say it would be, Buster Screen. And that says a lot about what's going on. But you also have a key injury on defense. So, injuries temper everything. And I saw an ugly one here in Philadelphia last night with Victor Cruz when he went down. But, it's just, as you said, next man up, war of attrition. It's not only hurting the Cleveland Browns, the injury situation, but it does, make you kind of shake your head and say, boy, we got something going. Let's keep our guys healthy.
Absolutely.
And that's the one, the one bad thing on a tremendous afternoon for Cleveland.
And that's a good way to segue around to some of the other stuff. And as you said, defensively, we brought up Armonty Bryant. He as well going to be down here most likely for the duration of the season. Now, that is a position where the Browns have more depth, but still, it's being tested now because you've now got several guys who are out. You'll get Phil Taylor back in a couple of weeks, but there's still that. You got Billy Wynn banged up. You've got Rubin banged up. So you've definitely, that depth is tested, and that's where good can go to bad really quick. So we'll see. But you brought up the injuries. Not just those two big ones for the Browns. You mentioned Victor Cruz. Let's start there. I was whining at the beginning of the segment because he's my stud, was supposed to be one of my stud wide receivers this year, and he was hanging tough in fantasy football for me, even with the Giants' problems, but he's toast now, gone for the season, and things just go from bad to worse for the Giants.
Yeah, the Giants, had a real tough night, and the fact that it's even far worse. I mean, we talked about how the Browns won and it suffered some injuries, but imagine getting shut out and then you lose your best receiver to a torn, patellar tendon. It was just a crushing blow to that organization as a whole. Such a devastating injury on national TV, and the fact that he was about to score a touchdown.
Yeah, I know.
On the ball,
I know.
Fourth down play, and so you knew something was wrong right away because Victor Cruz isn't dropping a touchdown pass, and obviously it was, for the Giants, it's even